Hi, I'm Marla. My family didn't just betray me, they erased me. The boardroom where I used to belong became the place they laughed at me. My sister called me a loser. My father told me to stay quiet, or I'd be fired. But here's the twist they never saw coming. While they were busy mocking me, I already owned 51% of the company, and I was done being quiet. So I smiled and started the countdown to their downfall. But the worst part wasn't what they did. It was realizing how long they'd been planning it. Dinners, apologies, even hugs, all fake. And the truth? It cuts deeper when it comes from your own blood. Before we dive in, tell me, what would you do if the people you trusted most tried to bury you alive? Would you walk away or burn it all down? Let's begin. The smell of polished wood and coffee hit me the moment I stepped into the boardroom. It was the same scent I'd grown up with, the one that clung to my father's suits when I was little, the one that meant power. Every seat around the long mahogany table was taken. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. Every single one, except the chair at the head of the table, my chair, the one with my nameplate. Except it wasn't there. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misread the room. Maybe they'd rearranged things. Maybe someone had forgotten to set it up properly. Then I caught the smirk on my sister's face. Victoria leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and said with that sugar-coated venom she's perfected since high school, "Oh, sorry, Marla. This table isn't for losers." The laughter that followed wasn't loud. That made it worse. It was soft, polite. The kind of laughter people use when they know they're watching a knife go in, but don't want to admit it. I stood there longer than I should have, clutching the folder in my hands like it could save me from drowning. My father didn't even look up at first. When he did, it was with that look, a flick of his eyes, sharp, dismissive. "Don't make a scene, Marla. Sit somewhere else or step outside if you're going to sulk." I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. "I wasn't aware I'd been uninvited," I said quietly. He ignored me. Just like that. The room went on without me. Reports clicked onto the screen, charts shifted, voices overlapped. I found myself standing near the corner, pretending to read the notes I'd prepared. The chair near the head of the table stayed empty, mocking me, my seat, my space. In the back of my mind, I heard my mother's voice, soft and steady. "Always sit with your spine straight, even if they try to break it." She used to say that when I was little, when Dad would yell and Victoria would run to him for comfort. I never did. I just stood there, trying not to cry. Now, decades later, I was doing the same thing. Victoria's voice cut through the buzz of conversation. "As for the Chicago project, well, since I've been leading it successfully, I think it's time we move ahead with my plan." My eyes shot up. That was my project, my data, my proposal, my entire last year's worth of work. I flipped through my folder. The pages with my initials were gone. The version on the screen listed Victoria Weston, lead strategist. A cold wave ran through me. It wasn't a clerical error. It was calculated. "Excuse me," I said, my tone low but steady. "That proposal, wasn't it originally under my name?" Victoria didn't even glance at me. "Oh, please, Marla. We've all contributed. Don't get territorial." My father cleared his throat. "She's right. We're a team. Let's not waste time with ego." I wanted to laugh. A team. What a joke. They only called it teamwork when they were taking credit for something I'd built. The meeting dragged on, each slide a small betrayal, each chuckle a cut. I stood there in silence, every second hardening something inside me. By the time my father closed his laptop and said, "We'll keep things as they are," my body felt weightless, detached, like I was watching it all from somewhere outside myself. "The board agrees," he said with a smug smile. I took a breath so deep it hurt. They agree because I wasn't given a seat. That stopped everything. The sound of papers shuffling froze. Even the projector light seemed to hold still. My father looked up, eyes narrowing. "Don't embarrass yourself." I took a step forward. My heels clicked against the floor, slow, deliberate. "You know, Dad, all my life you've told me to earn my place. I did that. I worked harder than anyone in this room, and you still made sure there was no place left for me." He pushed his chair back, his jaw tight. "Enough." Victoria's smirk returned. "Maybe this is your way of quitting gracefully." I met her gaze. Maybe it's my way of finally starting. The silence that followed was heavy. My father's face was red now, a mix of anger and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I laid the folder on the table, calm as ever. "You might want to check the ownership records before you hold another meeting without me." He frowned. "What records?" "The ones filed last quarter. I bought out the silent partners. I own 51% of Weston Holdings." The words landed like glass shattering. Victoria laughed first, short, brittle. "That's ridiculous. You couldn't have—" "Already did," I said. "You just didn't notice. You were too busy stealing my work." For the first time, my father didn't have an answer. His eyes darted to the others in the room, searching for confirmation, denial, anything. But all he got were blank faces. I gathered my papers slowly, straightening each one before slipping them into my folder. My pulse was steady now. As I turned to leave, my gaze drifted to that empty chair, the one they'd refused to give me, the one that still waited, silent and defiant. "You'll remember that chair," I whispered, barely loud enough for them to hear. And then I walked out. I didn't go straight home. I didn't even think to get in my car. I just walked, past the revolving doors, past the valet who started to call my name and thought better of it. My heels struck the sidewalk in even rhythm, sharp, deliberate, mechanical. It felt like I was counting something, maybe breaths, maybe steps, maybe the seconds until everything came undone. The air had that thick, post-storm humidity that Chicago likes to throw at you, even when skies are clear. People passed me by, heads in their phones, Starbucks in one hand. No one noticed the woman whose family had just stolen her life from under her nose. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my blazer. I didn't even kick off my heels. I poured a glass of Pinot, not because I needed to unwind, but because I needed something to hold while I rewatched the whole damn thing in my mind. Victoria's smug face, my father's voice, the empty chair. My phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it. But habit is funny like that. One line lit up the screen. "Per Mr. Weston's orders, your access to company records has been restricted." I stared at it for a long time, not shocked, not panicked, just awake. They weren't wasting time. They were already closing doors behind me. I set the phone down and stared out the window. The city blinked back at me, high-rise lights humming like nothing had changed. But I knew better. Something had shifted, quietly, permanently. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I watched the clock until it was almost 5. Then I showered, dressed in black slacks and a crisp blouse, and drove downtown. The parking attendant still waved at me like usual. The front desk clerk smiled like she didn't read the morning memo. And the security guard at the basement archive still called me Miss Weston, like he had for 20 years. "Just need to pull an old file," I said. He nodded and buzzed me in. Inside, the archive smelled like paper and cold metal. I sat down at one of the old terminals, pulled up the login screen, and typed in a project code I hadn't used in 5 years. It still worked. I'd written the backend on that system myself, an emergency override buried under layers of administrative fluff. I told no one, not even my assistant. The screen flickered to life. I started searching, slowly, carefully. Then I saw it. Transfer of shares, electronic approvals, my signature. Except, it wasn't mine. It looked like mine. At a glance, it would have passed, but the slant on the W was too even. The spacing on the lowercase a was off, and I never used a period after my middle initial. Each file was dated weeks apart, tiny amounts. 1% here, a 0.5% there. Always from board discretion accounts, always reallocated to Victoria. And each one co-signed by my father. It wasn't just theft, it was systematic erasure. I leaned back in the chair, hands trembling, not from fear, but from something colder. This wasn't about control. This was about rewriting history. They wanted the company, but more than that, they wanted the story that it had always belonged to them, that I had never mattered. I printed one page, the clearest forgery. I slid it into the leather planner I'd been carrying since my first management role. It used to be filled with hopes. Now it was becoming a vault. I walked back upstairs just before lunch hour. The building buzzed with energy, but none of it touched me. In the lobby, I spotted Victoria near the elevators. She was all polished confidence, perfect hair, designer coat, latte in hand, tapping away at her phone. She spotted me before I could turn away. "Morning, sis," she said brightly. "Long night?" "Productive," I replied, stepping closer. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "You look intense." I smiled. I get that way when I realize I'm surrounded by liars. Victoria tilted her head, feigning concern. "Everything okay?" I held her gaze. "How's my company treating you?" She blinked. That twitch, that hesitation, barely a second, but I saw it. "Your company?" she echoed, all innocence. "Check the ownership records," I said softly. "Just don't check them too late." She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking away. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, planner open, the printed page beside me. I'd stared at it for over an hour, tracing the fake signature line by line. The worst part wasn't that they'd forged it. It was that they assumed I'd never know. Or worse, that if I did, I'd keep quiet, like always. They'd counted on my silence, and that meant they hadn't accounted for what I was going to do next. I opened my laptop. A blank document blinked at me. I typed one word, countdown. Underneath it, I wrote, Day 1, audit. Day 2, legal counsel. Day 3, silence. Not for them, for me. This time, I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't beg to be seen. I'd make them see me, with facts, with proof, with strategy. Because I wasn't playing by their rules anymore, I was rewriting mine. I didn't sleep much after I typed that first word, countdown. The list glowed on my laptop screen like a quiet promise. But before day 1 could begin, I got a call from my father. He never called unless someone died or he needed something. "Dinner tonight," he said. "Just family, 7 o'clock. His voice was too calm. That rehearsed corporate calm he used before laying someone off. I'd heard it enough over the years to recognize the blade behind the smile. Still, I said yes. Curiosity has always been a flaw of mine. Or maybe hope. They wear the same clothes sometimes. By 6:30, I was parked outside the old mansion. The hedges were clipped to military precision. The windows glowed warm like something out of a postcard, but I knew better. That house had always been colder inside than the Chicago winters outside it. I stepped through the front door and paused. The scent hit me like a memory. Oak polish, cigar smoke, and just the faintest trace of my mother's lavender perfume. Even though she'd been gone over a decade, it still lived in the drapes, in the corners of the staircase, like her ghost refused to leave quietly. For one strange second, I felt 12 again, barefoot on that polished floor, clutching my first hand-drawn design, eager to show it to my father. He never looked up from his paper that day. I remember because I stood there for 6 whole minutes before walking away. Victoria was already at the top of the stairs when she spotted me. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well," she said, arms crossed, "you actually came." I stepped out of my coat. "It's still my family, for now." "Dad's in the dining room," she said, turning away before I could answer. I followed. Dinner was served like a royal affair. A long mahogany table stretched across the room, set with crystal glasses, white linen napkins, and polished silverware. Staff moved quietly between courses, their eyes trained on the floor, like they'd been told not to make eye contact. I sat across from Victoria. Arthur sat at the head, flanked by 2 empty chairs that hadn't been there since Mother passed. Her absence felt loud in that room. The food came. I don't remember the taste. The wine was red and dry, but it might as well have been water. No one spoke for the first half of the meal, except for the occasional clink of forks and the murmured thanks to the servers. It felt less like dinner and more like theater. Then, during dessert, something caught my eye. A new wall display in the dining room. Photographs, all neatly framed, arranged with the precision of a museum exhibit. Headlines, ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings. Weston holdings through the years. But there was something off. Something was missing. Every image I remembered from growing up in this house had been altered or erased. Photos where I once stood beside my father at events, gone. A magazine cover we once shared, replaced with one of Victoria alone. And the one that hit the hardest, the picture from the first factory opening. My mother's hand on my shoulder, smiling so proudly. That photo was still there, but her hand rested on Victoria now. The same frame, same background, different daughter. My pulse quickened. I pushed my plate aside. "Lovely, isn't it?" my father said, swirling his wine like he didn't just stab me through the chest with a picture frame. "It's different," I managed, the words thick in my throat. Victoria sipped her water, eyes glittering. "We've been updating the legacy wall. It felt outdated, disjointed." Arthur nodded. "Victoria's been helping organize things. Makes it all feel more unified." Unified. That word clanged in my head like a broken bell. I turned toward Victoria, my voice low. "You replaced me." She tilted her head, like I was being difficult. "You've been distant, Marla. We didn't think you'd care." "This is a family legacy wall," I said. "You edited me out of my own life." My father placed his napkin down. "Let's not make this into something it's not." I stood slowly, pushing my chair back with care. "You're right. Let's call it what it is. Erasure." "Sit down, Marla," he said firmly, like I was an employee, not his daughter. "I will," I said, voice even. "But just one question first." I pointed to the photo by the doorway. "When exactly did you start rewriting history?" The room froze. Victoria blinked fast, fork resting on her untouched cake. I looked back at both of them, let the silence stretch, then added, "Don't worry, the originals are safe. I made copies years ago." Victoria's lips parted slightly. Arthur didn't move, but I saw the faint twitch in his jaw. I sat back down, picked up my napkin, smoothed it out. "It's strange," I said softly, "being erased while you're still alive." Arthur stood. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm just finally paying attention." We didn't speak much after that. Dessert ended. The staff cleared the table. Victoria excused herself first, muttering something about an early flight. My father said nothing as I put on my coat. As I left, I passed the legacy wall again. I reached out, fingers brushing the glass over the photos. Where my face once smiled, there was now an empty space reflected back at me. But behind the glass, I could still see something. My reflection. Clear, whole. That was enough for tonight. I didn't sleep after dinner. I sat in my apartment, lights low, staring at the wall where my mother's picture used to hang. The lavender scent from my coat clung faintly in the room, mixing with something metallic in the air, resentment, maybe. I poured myself a second glass of wine, not for comfort, but to mark the silence. Then I opened my laptop and reread the copies I had saved years ago. Contracts, minutes, internal memos. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I needed more than gut. I needed something undeniable. By 5 the next morning, I was in the parking garage under Weston Holdings. My keycard still worked. Maybe a system delay, maybe intentional. Either way, I had a window. The office was dim and hollow, like a stage before opening night. I made my way to the executive records room. The air inside was cold and dry, like always. No one had changed the temperature settings I'd put in place back in 2016. Same with the file system, color-coded by year, blue folders for legal, green for operations. I opened the drawer marked 2018. The folders hadn't been touched, or maybe they had, by someone who thought they wouldn't be checked. And then I saw it. A contract titled Midwest Expansion Property Transfer. I had signed off on that deal, or so it claimed. My name, my title. But the moment I looked at the signature, I froze. The M in Marla had a loop I never used. The tail of the A curved left instead of right. These weren't details most would notice, but I'd spent over 2 decades writing that name in meetings, on deals, in letters to the board. This one wasn't mine. I flipped to the next page, my name again, another signature, and another. 4 in total. All carefully forged, each carrying the same false rhythm. The real kick? A watermark barely visible at the bottom of the page. Revised Template 2019, for internal audit only. That watermark didn't exist when this contract was supposedly signed. Whoever forged these papers used the wrong form. They hadn't even caught the date mismatch. They were sloppy enough to get caught. I slid the documents into a thick envelope and tucked it under my coat. I walked back toward my old office, now stripped of my nameplate, and stopped at the assistant's desk. It was different now. Glass top, sleek black monitor, and a woman I didn't recognize typing away with red nails and earbuds in. She looked up and blinked. "Oh, Miss Weston, I didn't think you still worked here." "I don't," I said gently, "but I need a quick favor. Did you print these?" She took the envelope with both hands, scanning the letterhead. I think so. Ms. Victoria asked for these to be finalized under your tag, said it was for internal alignment." My jaw tightened. What tag did she use for mine? The woman hesitated, then turned her name badge on the desk toward me. Operations Assistant, Marla Weston. I stared at it for a beat. Too long. "They told me it was just a placeholder," she added quickly. "Said you were taking a sabbatical." I didn't answer. I just smiled and walked away. That night, I dressed in black. Not for mourning, but for precision. The annual Weston Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Grand Hotel. Gold chandeliers, string quartet, champagne that cost more than most people's rent. I walked in just after the award ceremony had started. Arthur stood tall at the podium, hand resting on Victoria's shoulder as she beamed beside him. "None of this," she said into the mic, "would exist without the man beside me, my father, the architect of our legacy." Applause, cameras flashing, heads nodding like bobbleheads in tailored suits. I moved through the crowd quietly, avoiding eyes. I found a young man near the AV booth, balancing a tray of glasses. "Are you with the event staff?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I handed him the envelope. "Give this to the director. Tell him it's for the closing projection. He'll understand." The kid looked confused, but took it. Maybe it was the tone in my voice. Maybe he just knew better than to argue with a woman in heels who walked like she owned the room. I stepped back and waited. The applause began to die down. Victoria lifted her glass. And to the future. May Weston Holdings always be a reflection of honesty, strength, and family. She barely got to the word family when the projection screen behind her flickered. A document filled the screen, letterhead at the top. My name printed in bold. Then the signature, mine, or what they wanted to pass off as mine. And there, highlighted under the stage light, was the watermark. Revised Template 2019. For internal audit only. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Victoria turned, her expression shifting mid-sentence. She froze. Arthur's hand slipped from his glass. It tipped slightly on the podium, catching the microphone with a dull clang. No one said a word, not yet. I turned, weaving through the silent crowd, out into the hallway, and pressed the elevator button with a steady hand. As the doors opened, I whispered under my breath, "Let the countdown begin." The elevator doors closed behind me with a soft hiss, muffling the murmurs still echoing from the gala hall. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The image of my forged signature glowing across the screen would haunt them far longer than anything I could say. By the time I got home, the sky had turned a deep charcoal. I kicked off my heels, dropped my coat on the back of the chair, and finally let out the breath I'd been holding since the moment I walked into that room. The silence of my apartment didn't comfort me, it energized me. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, ignoring the hour. Sleep wasn't coming anyway. The city outside was winding down, but I was just getting started. I pulled my planner from the drawer, flipped to a blank page, and wrote 3 bold numbers down the center. 3, 2, 1 next to each. 3, call legal counsel. 2, audit all property records. 1, prepare for war. 32 missed calls blinked on my phone screen. 12 from my father, 8 from Victoria. The rest, PR, legal, board members, and 2 I didn't recognize but had area codes I knew too well. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sat at my kitchen island and opened the thickest file from my archive. Project blueprints, meeting notes, sign-off sheets, every piece of evidence that had my handwriting on it. That company wasn't just in my name, it was in my DNA. As the sun pushed its way above the buildings, I paused. A quiet voice from deep inside crept in, one I hadn't heard in years. My mother. Revenge makes you one of them. Truth makes you free. Her words didn't dull my resolve, they sharpened it. I picked up the folder labeled Confidential Ownership Structure. My hands were steady now. This wasn't just about winning, this was about restoring the truth and reclaiming the years they tried to erase. I dialed a number I hadn't called in over 5 years. Jeremiah Thomas, the voice answered, still firm, still tired sounding in that way only honest lawyers are. Jeremiah, it's Marla. A pause, then, took you long enough? I need you to file something, I said. Quietly, ownership verification. That'll trigger a board review, he said. I'm counting on it. By 3:15 that afternoon, I was back at Weston Holdings. No blazer, no makeup, just me, sharp and deliberate. The receptionist flinched when she saw me, then quickly glanced away. Ms. Weston, they've been expecting... They'll wait, I said. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, floor by floor. Let them feel me coming. Let them squirm. When I entered the boardroom, no one spoke. Victoria was already seated, arms folded tight like she'd been rehearsing a rebuttal all day. My father stood by the window, sipping scotch as if nothing had happened. I slid a white envelope across the table to the board secretary. Ownership verification notice, I said calmly. Filed by the majority shareholder. He opened it, eyes darting over the header, then down the list. My name, my shares, my audit findings, my proof, and their signatures. All of them, verified, forged, dated, exposed. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for a glass of water. Arthur's jaw clenched. "You wouldn't dare," he muttered. "I would," I said. "And I just did." He took a step forward. "You're playing with fire, Marla." I looked at him with the same gaze he used to give me when I was 12. Cold, unwavering. "No, Dad, I'm playing by the rules. You just never thought I'd learn them." The room cracked with tension. No shouting, just the sound of the board secretary flipping pages and the tick of the clock on the far wall. "You'll regret this," my father said, his voice low. I stood. "Maybe, but at least this time I'll regret it on my own terms." One by one, I looked each board member in the eye. Some dropped their gaze. A few gave the smallest of nods. One woman, Anna Cho, the CFO, held my stare and just barely smiled. I turned toward the door. "We reconvene in 3 days," I said. "Bring your attorneys." I pressed the elevator button. It lit up immediately. As the doors opened, I whispered to myself, "Day 1, done." They didn't wait 3 days. They didn't even wait 3 hours. By the time I opened my eyes the next morning, the first headline had already made the rounds. Marla Weston under investigation for fraudulent ownership claims. The words glared from my phone screen like an alarm bell. Beneath it, a flood of notifications stacked like bricks. Texts, voicemails, emails. Each started the same way. "Are you okay?" I wasn't, but I'd be damned if I said it out loud. The smear campaign was coordinated, polished, vicious. By 8 a.m., I was the face of corporate scandal across every news outlet in Chicago. Local anchors dissected my supposed scheme to seize control. Financial blogs questioned my mental health. Someone even dug up an old clip of a board meeting, a private argument with my father, edited just enough to make me look unhinged. And that was just the first wave. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I watched the news on mute, letting the captions crawl across the screen. "She faked her signature," one expert claimed. This wasn't a mistake, it was strategic theft. I let out a bitter laugh. If only they knew how much of myself I'd signed away willingly. After a cold shower and a strong cup of coffee, I got dressed. Black turtleneck, dark jeans, coat. No jewelry, no makeup, just armor. I arrived at the Weston Holdings building at exactly 9 a.m. The lobby was buzzing with morning traffic, but the second I stepped in, the atmosphere shifted. 2 security guards intercepted me before I reached the elevators. One of them, Kevin, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Ms. Weston, I'm sorry, but we've been instructed not to allow you upstairs." I didn't flinch. "On whose orders?" He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the hallway behind me. Victoria's heels clicked into view before he could answer. She looked pristine. Tailored navy dress, manicured hands wrapped around a branded coffee cup, expression just this side of smug. "Rough morning?" she asked lightly, as if we were catching up at brunch. I stared at her, my jaw still, eyes steady. "You've been busy." Her smile widened. "You shouldn't have started something you couldn't finish." Her perfume caught me off guard. Lavender. Not the real kind. Not the delicate scent our mother wore. This was synthetic, too sharp, too sweet. It hit me all at once. The dinner, the fake warmth, the calm before the ambush. Every detail had been part of the same machine. They'd played the long game. I just hadn't seen the full board until now. I left without another word. Drove home with the windows up, radio off, thoughts racing faster than traffic. Inside my apartment, the television was still on. Another panel of talking heads debated my downfall. She acted alone. She manipulated the system. She always wanted to be bigger than her father. I muted it, walked into the living room, and stood in front of the mirror above the fireplace. My reflection looked unfamiliar. jaw clenched, eyes red-rimmed, hands twitching. And then, almost without thinking, I reached out, grabbed the edge of the mirror, and slammed it to the floor. Glass exploded across the hardwood, 1,000 jagged reflections scattering at my feet. I knelt slowly. My breath was uneven. Each shard caught a different version of my face, one frightened, one furious, one numb, and just one calm. "They think I'll break quietly," I whispered. I stood, wiped my hands on my jeans, walked to my desk. The world wanted war? Fine. But I wouldn't fight like them. No theatrics, no headlines, just evidence. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files I'd backed up years ago. Legal ownership filings, timestamps, original system logs. The final piece? An email Victoria had foolishly sent to the company accountant 6 months ago. Subject: share transfer logs. Body: make sure the dates match. No one checks the old system. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I composed a post. Simple, direct. Not defensive, revealing. A trail of receipts, not a rant. I scheduled it for 7 a.m., just as the next board meeting would begin. Let them read it in real time. Let the fire start in their own house. Before heading to bed, I cleaned the glass, carefully gathering the sharpest pieces. I left one small triangle on my desk, a reminder. I whispered to it, "You can cut or you can reflect. Depends how you hold it." The apartment went dark, but in my mind, the gears turned faster than ever. The countdown wasn't just ticking, it was accelerating. By 6:58 a.m., I was parked across the street from Weston Holdings, watching the tower slowly wake up. Floor by floor, the lights inside blinked on like a countdown. Chicago was still wrapped in fog, the sidewalks damp with leftover rain. A quiet kind of storm. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermos and stared at the entrance, calm in a way that felt unnatural. I'd barely slept. Still, I wasn't shaking. At exactly 7 a.m., my post went live. Within minutes, the responses poured in. First came the angry texts, then the panicked calls. Subject lines in my inbox screamed louder than sirens. "What the hell, Marla? Need to talk. Urgent. Board meeting, 8 a.m. You're expected." I smiled to myself. Right on schedule. By the time I entered the building, the lobby had already shifted from routine to chaos, phones ringing nonstop, whispers echoing off marble floors, interns too afraid to make eye contact. Upstairs, the boardroom felt colder than I remembered, not in temperature, but in tension. Everything about it was controlled, the symmetry of chairs, the perfectly centered floral arrangement, the projector already humming. But this time, I wasn't standing by the wall, waiting for permission. I walked in like I belonged, because I did, and sat in the one chair they'd left empty the last time. Arthur walked in last, carrying a thick file like a weapon. Victoria followed, visibly tense despite the flawless makeup. No one greeted me. I didn't mind. He dropped the file on the table, loud, deliberate. "You think you can humiliate your family in public?" His voice had that low rumble he used when trying to intimidate, as if volume equaled power. I looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't humiliate anyone. I just opened the blinds." Victoria crossed her arms, trying to regain control. "You think a viral post gives you authority? You're not even employed here." I leaned forward slightly. The internet disagrees. 1.2 million views. Most of them came with the words, "We believe you." The board shifted uncomfortably. Half of them were reading the post under the table. Then their lead attorney, one I remembered interviewing 3 years ago, stepped forward. "Ms. Weston, the documents in that post," he began, voice calm, rehearsed, "were not obtained through official channels. That could constitute a violation." "Incorrect," I cut in. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a small recorder and pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the air. Make sure the dates match. No one checks the old system. Silence. Victoria's face went pale. Arthur slowly turned toward her, eyes sharp enough to cut. That clip's out of context, she snapped. You're twisting it? I shrugged. Let's give it some context then. I clicked open my laptop. The projector kicked to life, splashing documents across the wall, each one time-stamped, backed by audit trails, signed, sealed, and weaponized. I spoke clearly. These files prove I never lost my majority ownership. Every fake transfer, every forged approval, every time you used my name without my knowledge. Arthur's hand trembled slightly. As he reached for a glass of water he didn't drink. You don't understand what you've done, he growled. You're playing with fire. I know exactly what I've done, I said evenly. I stopped lying to protect a legacy that's already burned. The lead board member, a woman named Helen with sharp eyes and a sharper sense of ethics, cleared her throat. In light of these revelations, the board moves to immediately suspend Arthur and Victoria Weston from all executive duties, pending full federal review. The room erupted into a blur of noise. Gasps, phones vibrating, someone outside yelling to a cameraman. Security entered within minutes. They didn't have to be asked twice. Arthur stood slowly, pointing one shaking finger at me. You betrayed your blood, he hissed. I didn't flinch. You made me choose between blood and truth. I chose the one that doesn't rot. As they were led out, the air shifted. For the first time, people weren't looking through me. They were watching, listening. I stood and walked to the end of the table, to that one chair, the one they'd never filled. I reached out and pushed it in. Outside, reporters pressed against the glass. The flashes from their cameras lit the room in staccato bursts, a visual echo of how it all started. I didn't look at them. Instead, I looked around the table and said simply, "Meeting adjourned." The boardroom emptied out, but the echoes didn't fade. By the time I stepped out of Weston Holdings, the sidewalk was a gallery of microphones and camera flashes. No one asked if I was okay. They only wanted quotes. But the story didn't end there. Not for them, and definitely not for me. The next morning, my phone screen was a wall of headlines. Weston Holdings implodes amid fraud scandal. Daughter of CEO exposes family empire. I sat at my kitchen counter in a t-shirt and robe, coffee untouched, watching the muted news anchors mouth words they never bothered to learn before. My name. They called me a whistleblower, a reformer, even a corporate heroine. They didn't know I never wanted this. I didn't come to burn the house down. I just wanted my seat at the table back. But the house was burning anyway. At noon, Jeremiah called. His voice was quiet. Arthur collapsed during questioning this morning. I straightened in my chair. Collapsed? Mild heart attack, stress-induced. He's stable. Mercy Hospital. I didn't speak. The line stayed open. Jeremiah didn't push. He never did. I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. The drive across the river was short, but my thoughts stretched miles. Inside the hospital, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as a nurse guided me to room 213. She asked if I was family. I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded. He looked smaller in that bed. The man who used to tower over boardrooms now lay curled beneath thin sheets, machines quietly measuring his heartbeat. His eyes fluttered open. You came, he murmured, barely audible. I stood at the foot of the bed. I didn't come for comfort, I said. I came to make sure you live long enough to face what you did. A tired smile crept across his lips. You sound like your mother. That hit harder than anything else he could have said. I didn't reply. I just stood there a while longer, listening to the soft beeping of the monitor, trying to feel something other than rage. 2 days later, Victoria knocked on my door. Not called, not texted, just showed up. No lipstick, no heels. Her coat soaked from the rain. When I opened the door, she didn't speak right away. She just looked at me, eyes swollen, voice shaking. "Please, you have to stop. He won't survive this." I let her inside, motioned toward the couch, and she sank onto it like someone who hadn't slept in days. "You didn't seem too worried about my survival when you were signing my name," I said calmly. She wiped her face with her sleeve. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We wanted recognition. You always had Mom's attention, Dad's expectations. I wanted something too. And so you forged my name? I didn't know what else to do." She broke down, shoulders shaking. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. "I can't undo what's done," I said, sitting across from her. "But if you want to salvage what's left of your life, you start by telling the truth." "Publicly." She nodded through tears, and I didn't say another word. By the end of the week, the dominoes fell fast. Weston Holdings stock dropped nearly 50%. Shareholders demanded explanations. Arthur officially stepped down, citing personal and medical reasons. Victoria gave a statement through her attorney, full cooperation, full admission. And me, I signed the final press release as acting CEO. When I clicked send, the office fell into a strange kind of silence. Not awkward, not cold, just cleared. Like the air after a storm. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the clouds roll in over the city. It should have felt like triumph, but it didn't. It felt like something had been extracted, painfully, necessarily, like pulling out a rotten tooth. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. Rain tapped the glass as the city lights blinked below. I thought of Mom. She used to tell me, "Truth is never comfortable, but it's always clean." I whispered, "You were right, but it hurts like hell." Behind me, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Victoria. "He asked for you." I stared at it for a long while, the screen glowing in the dim room. Then I turned it face down. Justice had its moment. But peace? That was something I'd have to earn on my own. The truth had set me free. But freedom has a price. 6 months had passed, seasons shifted, buildings didn't. But I had. When I stepped into the Weston Holdings boardroom again, it wasn't to defend myself. It wasn't to fight or prove anything. It was just a meeting. And for the first time, the room felt still, peaceful even. The space had changed. The glossy portraits of old men in darker suits had been replaced with new faces, some young, some not, but all of them chosen for integrity, not pedigree. A plaque on the far wall caught my eye. It read, "Integrity builds legacy." I never asked who picked those words. I didn't need to. The meeting was short, straightforward, budgets, plans, small victories, no backhanded jabs, no veiled threats, just work. When it was over and the board members trickled out with polite nods and briefcase snaps, I stayed behind. The chair beside mine, the one that used to be my father's, remained empty. I ran my hand along the carved edge of the wood. It still held the weight of memory, still carried the silence he used to command. "You remember that chair now, don't you?" I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. That evening, I stopped by the hospital. One last visit. Arthur had been discharged weeks ago, but his strength never fully returned. Age had caught up with him, or maybe truth had. He sat by the window when I walked in, wearing a blanket more than a coat. His hands, once calloused and commanding, now trembled slightly when he reached for his tea. "You came again," he said, surprised but not unkind. "I came for me this time." He nodded slowly. "I used to think you were too soft to lead." I didn't respond right away, just sat across from him and looked out at the same skyline he once ruled. "You always underestimated quiet," I said. We talked then, really talked, for the first time in years. About Mom, about the company, about the way ambition had carved cracks into all of us. He smiled faintly. You were always more like her. She never raised her voice either, just her standards. When I stood to leave, he didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But something in the air felt looser, like a window had finally been opened in a room too long sealed shut. Weeks passed. Victoria showed up at the office again. This time, she wasn't dressed in power or pretense, just a soft blouse and a visitor badge clipped to her sweater. She didn't speak much, just came and went for consultant meetings, avoided eye contact, and left quietly. Until one afternoon, I found a folded note on my desk in the corner of a budget report. Her handwriting, still sharp, still familiar. I found the chair in storage. I fixed the crack. You should have it back. That night, I stayed late and carried it out myself. It was heavier than I remembered. The same seat they'd once left vacant now sat in the corner of my living room. Polished, restored, whole. I didn't sit in it right away. Not until the house was quiet, the lights low, and I was ready. I lowered myself into the seat, closed my eyes, and for just a moment I was back there, standing at the end of the boardroom, surrounded by people who saw through me, not to me. But now I didn't need their eyes. I had my own. In that silence, I heard her again, my mother's voice. Sit with your spine straight, even if they try to break it. I always thought she was talking about posture. She wasn't. She was talking about pride. The chair wasn't just a seat. It was every time I stood alone. Every time I didn't back down. Every time I chose truth, even when it cost everything. On Sunday, I drove to the cemetery. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. I brought a single white lily and knelt beside the headstone. I kept my spine straight, I said, voice barely above a whisper. It's over, Mom. The wind didn't answer, but it felt warmer. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. Family dinner tonight? No business, just family. I smiled. Small, surprised. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something near it. Driving home, I glanced at the skyline through the windshield. Still sharp, still scarred, still standing, just like me. The countdown had ended long ago. Now it was time to start again. The chair was never about the seat. It was about standing tall when no one offered you one.